Hi everybody, and welcome to the senatorial debate for Idaho's District 26, which covers Blaine County, Camas County, Gooding County, and Lincoln County. I'm Tatiana Gray. I'm the founder of Central Idaho for Liberty. We're the hosting organization, and we're going to start this debate with the recital of the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about the rules of this debate. One of our founding members, Jeff Kreisig, is going to lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Again, welcome everybody. Again, I'm Tatiana Gray. I'm the founder of Central Idaho for Liberty. We are a nonpartisan organization. However, we're a conservative organization. So we're hosting this event, this debate in a little bit different format. You can probably see that we have two moderators for our debate. And in the spirit of disclosure, our organization hasn't endorsed Eric Parker, so that's why we have two moderators to make it more fair. You can find more information about our organization by going to ci4l.org, or you can just search for Central Idaho for Liberty. And since this is the senatorial debate only, we have the incumbent Senator Michelle Stennett here. Thank you so much for being here for the Democrat Party. And we have the senatorial challenger, Mr. Eric Parker, here for the Republican Party. And yeah, thank you so much for both of you being here. And we have the moderators. We have Britton Latulip from Camas County, and he is moderating for Eric Parker. And we have Sarah Michael from Blaine County, moderating for Senator Stennett. So we really appreciate our moderators and the work that they put into this. I also thank you for all of the volunteers from our organization. Couldn't have done it without you, so there's a lot of tech involved, so thank you so much. And we have several members of the press. Again, we really appreciate you being here, and we're looking forward to the coverage that you provide for this event. And I will quickly run over the rules because, again, this is a little bit different format for a debate. We have two moderators. Many of you saw it in the beginning. They flipped an object, a key, and by luck of the draw, Britton will go first and ask the first question. And after that, the moderators will be alternating asking questions. Each moderator will have enough time to ask up to 6 questions. We're trying to be mindful of the time, and so you'll see us maybe going fast-paced, but we are trying to be mindful of the time. So the moderators will alternate asking questions. However, each moderator will pick either of the debaters to ask their question to first. And then each debate participant will have up to 3 minutes. They don't have to take out the full 3 minutes, but they can to answer the questions. So the first debate participant will answer, the second debate participant will answer the question. There will be no rebuttals. And then, of course, the order will alternate. After all of the questions have been asked, then each give their closing statement. And we'll continue in that same order since Britton was asking the first question, and Eric Parker is going to be the first one to give the closing statement to keep that order going. We are asking you, of course, to be respectful, no booing, or even asking you guys to please hold the applause until both of the debaters are done with their closing statement. Again, we're going fast-paced, and so save your applause till the very end, please. We have a timekeeper here. Barb will raise the yellow with 30 seconds to spare, and she will raise the red card when the time's up, and we've asked each of the debate participants to finish their thought at that point. It might be a couple seconds or 5 seconds. I think generally we covered all the rules, right? So With this said, again, thank you so much for all of you who are here. Thank you so much to everybody who's watching this live on different platforms. Thank you so much. And without further ado, we are going to start with Britton asking the first question.
This first question is for Stennett. Is the federal government properly managing federal lands in Idaho?
Thank you for the question. And hello, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity, and I want to thank Tatiana for having us here. This is really important. Good process. To answer your question about federal lands, you may not understand that federal lands actually, what we've received as far as state lands and federal lands has been, and that was under the understanding that we signed an agreement that as a condition of statehood, we would never seek taking other lands. So that was what we were given. And of course, as you know, the state endowed lands are for education and other endowments for the state. That is run by the Idaho Department of Lands. And the federal lands, of course, are run by the various agencies, the Forest Service and the... And so, to answer your question, I personally think that there could be better management on the federal lands. We all have seen these fires, and a lot of that has to do because it's been not cleared on the understory or thinned appropriately, or working with various groups in order to manage them better. They're under... we have cooperatives in this state that have been doing this for 15 years, and they've successfully managed public lands better than in many federal places, and in state places, I would argue. To manage lands, to create jobs, to boost selective logging, and improve overall forest health through a cooperative planning process. And that benefits the rural communities for forestry, the timber that they get off of it. It creates jobs. It also helps to make for a healthier forest. And you are able to work with watersheds and cooperatives, bring everybody who has some help or say so that this can be done better. And so I don't want to lose the access to federal lands. We ability to create, recreate, and to be able to go on public lands in this state. We are about 63% public lands here. And so I would defend to preserve that, because I think it's a tremendous gift and privilege for all of us to be able to do that in this state. But I do think that there is a lot of conversation now, particularly when we see what's happening with all the forest fires and impacts on our forest, that there is a conversation to be had about managing them better. I have spoken to the 2 U.S. congressmen, and they have agreed that they hope at some point to be able to convince Congress to be able to find a management plan and have a different course of action for our forests. Thank you.
Short answer. Can you hear me? Everybody hear me? Short answer. No, I think it could be managed a lot better. I do think that the Good Neighbor initiative that they're working on right now, where that brings the locals and the state into the conversation a lot more, I do appreciate that. I think that's exactly what we need to have is more of a local input. I think the idea that a lot of Idahoans do, which is log it, graze it, or watch it burn. I think we need to start pushing those timber sales. The president has indicated that the timber sales should go to the localities. But then we see in places up north where that's just, I think we really need to do good neighbor initiatives, get the locals input. The other issue I have with the management is public access. I believe that it's the manager's responsibility to maintain and uphold access to our public lands, and I believe that our state could probably do a little bit more to hold their feet. They're keeping those accesses.
My question, the next question is for Mr. Parker. Idahoans have been demanding property tax relief. What is your stance on this and why?
Thank you for the question. Well, with property tax, I would first say that they're not out of line requesting relief. And I would also say that we need to maybe change our thinking a little bit as to why property tax is so high. Some of our neighboring states have brought in of business and enterprise, and they've attached to funding the school systems. Follow suit to everything our neighbors do, but I think we approach this with a different outlook of bringing in new industry and earmarking that tax revenue to our schools. We're going to take pressure off of the property tax. And that's what I would like to do is really encourage new, better economy. And with that better economy is going to come more tax revenue.
I would say that there's very little argument that we need property tax relief. It was one of the biggest conversations we had during this last legislative session. Residential taxpayers are being burdened by numerous tax shifts and the escalating property tax, as we know from everybody who's moving in here. They're bearing the burden. And part of that is a shift that happened earlier in the state that moved towards residential taxes and away from commercial and agricultural. And I think there needs to be more balance in that. During the 2020 legislative session, we had 23 property tax bills, and none of them were passed. And so it shows how there was either a lack of political will or a lot of infighting, and I would argue both, about what it was that would actually help. And it was everything from giving, which I would advocate for, giving seniors some kind of relief, because they're the people in our communities who deserve to stay in their homes if they can and not be taxed out of them. During the last tax shift that we had 2 years ago, there was a shift away from the homeowner's exemption that we used to have, and that needs to be reinstated in all fairness. I think that there's a reevaluation of our sales tax exemption, which we talked about, because there are so many lines of statute about how our taxes are distributed that are more evenly distributed would merit a very strong, robust look. Impacted like the, and this burden is partly, as Mr. Parker mentioned, is because we have so many people moving into the state, and unfortunately, because we don't charge them for any kind of impact fees or whatever for that development, it is the burden of those who are that expense. And I think that needs to be far more equitable. Right now, property tax, say that 3 times fast, and that is something that is being administered through the state to local governments through COVID dollars, federal dollars, and it's for counties and cities and taxing districts to replace property tax funds for first responders. If they were willing to give up their 3% budget increase for 1 year. So right now, local governments get a 3% increase, and they would have to abandon that for the year if they were to take on this program. So the difficulty with that is, what if a county decides to not take the program, but a city does? And so there's going to be a lot of discussion without a lot of guidance about how your assessors and treasurers are going to be able to manage that, because of the formulas that they need, and it would really be easier if all of the communities within a county would have agreed, but that wasn't part of it, and so we're just going to have to see how that fleshes out, but there is no guarantee that it'll give meaningful property to residential owners, and I just want to clarify that, and if it does at all, then they will only have it for 1 year.
This next question is for Stennett. First, is it ethical for a candidate to accept campaign donations from lobbyists, special interest groups, and corporations doing business in Idaho?
Thank you for that question. There is a code of honor that I would advocate to, that if you are to receive money from somebody that you do not believe that you can represent, and or if they choose to give you money and you go up to them, which is what I do, and say, listen, I never vote for anything you bring to me, and therefore, if you choose to give this to me, you know I'm probably not going to change my stance. But you also know that I am going to have an open door policy like I do everybody, all sides, both parties, anybody who has anything to do with that bill, because I want to be knowledgeable from all sides. And I'll be very forthcoming whether I agree with you or not and why. And so if you're willing to sit at my table and willing to hear that and be very clear that I may not ever vote in your favor on this, know that I have an open door policy, that will be my stance. And almost always when somebody has walked up to me about that, or whether I've approached them about the potential for receiving any funds from them, they said, I just respect that you have always been upfront and always been honest about it. You'll never backstab me. I know exactly where you stand. And if I still choose to do this, I'm very clear about why.
Some special interest groups are okay. They're not bad. We've got one in the back of the room. I consider him a special interest group. He defends the Constitution. He works. There's other special interest groups that are very, very anti-American. And I've tried to stay clear of those. And I've also made an extreme effort to not approach lobbyists. I want my campaign to be funded from the people. When I walk into that building, if you guys hire me, I'm not going to be beholden to anybody except for the people in District 26 who send me there.
My next question is for Mr. Parker. What are the current issues with water management? What would you do to address them?
Well, the specific issues I'm not really sure of. I'd have to look into them. You know, I can admit when I don't know something. I'm an electrician, and I'm asking you to hire me to send me to the State House. I promise that I will look into these things. People that are for these things, what they think, and I will try to represent you guys the best of my ability. I have individuals who work in the Capitol on bills, on language. If something like this were to come up, what my first move would probably be is to ask them to get me a file with everything they could find on this subject. And then I would start to look into it, and I would start to educate myself, and then I would try to make the best decision and call for the people in District 26.
One of the more difficult things to manage through is water law in this state is extraordinarily important. And even the water lawyers I speak to say they've done this for a lifetime and it is complicated. But there are basic rules, first in time, first in right. And our district has been unfortunately ground zero for the water calls. We've had them a couple of times, no other part of the state. And so to figure out all like our district, water, whether it's recreation, tourism, or agriculture, we have to allow for that water to go to the proper people in the and so we've been working as a collaborative for the last 3 years to put together. We're on our third effort, but we're still for our entire just the watershed of the water that comes out of here. Through canal systems and stock rights and so on, we get water from eastern Idaho that comes through this and our canals, which we use in our district. And so it's a pretty complicated and large geographical area. So there's a couple of plans. We put some money aside to raise some of our reservoirs to allow more fill, which would be something that we could use for beneficial and agricultural use. But Idaho ranks at the top 2 for water consumption in both beneficial drinking water and agricultural water, which means that we don't manage our water very well in the end because we're wasting a lot of it. So I would argue one of the low-hanging fruits is to make sure that we put metering and we monitor our consumption more closely so that we can keep our water where it needs to be for proper use and not waste it. On the other hand, Idaho is the only state that has adjudicated its surface and groundwater in 80% of its watersheds, which is extraordinary. No other state. We also have, in the northern Idaho, which is a small piece that's left, is due to be completed in the next 4 years. We also have established a water bank and a water board, which helps us both negotiate water trades and management, strides in replenishing and refilling about a foot a year because of plumbing. And so we've made some really wonderful strides, something that some other states have not accomplished, which I would like to give a shout out. And then finally, we're negotiating and I'm working with an organization on the Columbia River Treaty, which is a treaty between the United States and Canada. And it's up for renewal right now. And it controls all flood control, reservoirs, hydroelectric, fisheries, and irrigation. So it is hugely important to negotiate the new terms. And so that is something on a regional and international level that will impact our water in our district.
This next question is for Stennett. Do you believe that placing restrictions on firearms, including red flag laws, is infringing the Second Amendment?
Idaho is, I think, second only to Arizona for being the most restricted state in the nation. And so what has passed in the state is not prohibiting most all use if anybody wants to. There will be those that argue that there are a few things that they'd like to see that Idaho do, but it is really unrestricted. Would you want someone to drive a car without knowing how to drive it or have any training? Or would you want somebody to do surgery on you without having any training? There's so many things that make people or somebody needs to know how to use the device that I'm a strong advocate for proper gun training because I believe it's safer for everyone. But I believe in the Second Amendment. I do own guns. I do hunt. Be much safer through some proper training.
I believe that that's an infringement. Red flag laws, no, I wouldn't vote for any. I believe the state constitution and the U.S. Constitution mean what they say. And I believe that driving is not constitutionally protected conduct. And the issue I would have is that, yes, training's good and it should be encouraged. It should be affordable. And I would even like to see the state and the counties offer that through their law enforcement. But when we mandate those things, we're actually infringing on the law of the land. And as an elected, if I raise my right hand and swear an oath to the Constitution, I believe by passing any kind of legislation that infringes or chips away at any of those amendments, not just the second, the first, the third, the fifth, I'm actually breaking the law, and I wouldn't do that.
This question is for Mr. Parker. Idaho's state and local roads are in critical need of maintenance. For example, on some roads, school buses have to make detours to avoid unsafe bridges. As a state senator, what do you propose to do to fix our roads?
Again, I would go back to innovation and creating a better economy that's going to encourage more tax revenue to use for infrastructure. I believe we need to use money to make infrastructure. I believe in the social contract. I want roads without potholes. I just believe that we need to make sure that this money is being utilized in the best and most efficient way. And a lot of times it's not, and that's how we end up with those holes in the roads. So I do believe that the answer doesn't always have to be tax increases off the back of the working people that work hardest. I think we really need to figure out a way to encourage more companies to come to Idaho, new businesses, we couldn't even get the hemp bill passed in this state, and that's a huge new industry in an ag state. I think that's ridiculous. I think we should be investigating these other avenues and looking at how we can bring them here to Idaho. And I think the first would be to get out of and pass some more modern legislation to allow these sort of industries to come in.
So Idaho right now is almost $500 million behind in maintenance of repairing roads and bridges, just maintenance, not new construction, which will need to happen because of all the growth that we're seeing. And counties, if you count the county and state bridges combined, there are 2,000 bridges that are deemed to age out and unfit to travel on. And that is a public safety issue. Something that we've been fighting in the legislature for quite some time. About 6 years ago, we raised the registration and gas taxes, but that mostly impacted the very people, just working individuals, the commuters, light trucks. And we promised that we were going to come back to do the commercial industries, the ones that have the heavy loads, the ones that have used the roads the most, and frankly, the ones that we need. And yet we never fighting for the last 6 years in order to increase and try to address what the commercial trucking industry is actually doing to our transportation infrastructure. So I think my opinion is that I think that every user on the roads needs to be paying their fair share. And instead, we pass legislation to make loads heavier and longer and faster, and then we never fixed what they're riding on. That's true of railroads. They're putting heavier and longer and faster rail cars on infrastructure that is over 80 years old. It's just not safe. And so every time I talk about infrastructure, a large piece of that, aside from all the other things you can think of infrastructure, one of the most critical things that we should be addressing is our transportation system, because it's dangerous driving for everybody. It's going to hinder our economy at some point. And we need to seriously look at it. There has been some efforts. They've been met with a lot of resistance, particularly in the House Transportation Committee. And but I've been a proponent of trying to get this fixed for quite some time. I'm going to continue to push on it. But we also have to know when we're talking about transportation, that we have to be looking at water and sewer systems, healthcare, schools, broadband. A lot of things that have happened in this last few months. We've noticed that we are woefully and adequately trying to manage some of this infrastructure. And with the amount of people that are moving in and the pressure that continues to be placed on it, we are going to have to address it for safety reasons.
This next question is for Senator Stennett. First, is it wrong to allow the killing of babies by way of late-term, partial birth, or after-birth abortion?
There has never been a bill that's been brought before the legislature for birth abortion. That is something that would never be entertained by this legislature. It's not something that I would ever advocate for, and it is unconstitutional and illegal. That said, the U.S. Constitution clearly states and outlines what abortion law is. And we are obligated under a swearing an oath of office, what Mr. Parker said, Idaho and use Constitution in what they say. Until we fix that, if that's what you choose to do, or change the law or change policy, we are guided by what is in place. And we have to abide by the laws, all of them, not just the ones we like, and then actively work to make better the ones we don't. Now, I want to be able to tell you a little story about who these type of people that impact this, because I hold their hands when we have these stories come to the legislature all the time. You have a mom who has 2 kids who's pregnant for a 3rd one, and during her pregnancy, her husband dies. And she finds out that her baby is not forming correctly and is likely is going to have some health issues. And if they don't make a choice, it's either going to be the mother or the child who dies. And if the mother dies, it's the two children and the infant who are orphaned. Or if you talk to a couple who's excited about having their first child, they're pregnant for their first child, and then they find out through the ultrasound that the baby is not forming a brain, and that it will die immediately upon birth. You have to put faces to what laws do to people. And I would argue that these are horribly difficult decisions that families need to make with their physician, and it is not up to us. What we don't do, and what we have the authority to legislate in Idaho, is for the children who are born. According to the Idaho Voices for Children, the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, and the Office of Performance Evaluation, Idaho ranks at the bottom of the nation for child care. There's very little paid maternity leave, and the state has the bare minimums for daycare providers, and daycare centers and in-home providers are sorely strapped and on the brink of collapse. 135,000 students don't get it. And we have inadequate adoption and foster care system that has very little oversight, and it has very little accountability and struggles with abuse and neglect. And there are 16,000 children in the foster care system. So when we're talking about taking care of children, what the state has the authority to do is take care of children at all levels, and we need to do a better job.
Late-term abortion, partial birth abortion, no. I'm very against that. But like Michelle said, Senator Stennett said, I do think we should work, what we can work on is trying to create an environment where it's not necessary. And I would, as a state, to create it not necessary. Also said, we bring the oath, it's definitely in there. So the question, I'd like to not get too far off in the weeds. The question was about late term and partial birth abortion. No, I would not vote for that if it were to ever come out of it.
Mr. Parker, in the past you pled guilty to breaking the 2015 showdown between the Bureau of Land Management at the Bundy's Ranch in Nevada. If elected, you will take an oath of office to swear to follow all laws in the Constitution of the U.S. and of Idaho. Will you obey these laws and follow the Constitution even if you disagree with them?
It was 2014. Misdemeanor obstruction. That's the charge I took. I had about 15 charges, felonies. I was facing life in prison. I was acquitted on 98% of those charges. The federal government has a 97% conviction rate. 98% of those charges, I was found by 12 other human beings as not guilty. They held the other charges over my head for a third trial. They offered me a misdemeanor obstruction. Now, a misdemeanor obstruction is the same as jaywalking. If anybody's never done that before, go ahead and raise your hand. I would take 2 more misdemeanor obstructions to stand up for the First Amendment. I told the prosecution that. So, yes, I will follow the law, but an unjust law is an illegal law per the Constitution. And I'll try to, what I'll do more than that is try to make sure that that doesn't happen. And put people in positions like I was in, where I had to make a decision where I would put my freedom at risk to defend the First Amendment.
I would just answer that, as I mentioned before, when we swear the oath of office, we swear to follow all laws, both the U.S. Constitution and the state of Idaho. And there are some that I would disagree with, or that I would hope that we could make better, or alter, or change. But our jobs are passion, and until then, we have to uphold it. And so, it makes for very difficult, Mr. Parker is correct, choices. When you have to do what you're sworn to do, and you may philosophically or personally not agree with it. But that's what we're there to do. And then where our jobs are to try to improve the lives of Idahoans by actively, within the proper process, make changes where we see changes need to be made. But we're going to split hairs a little bit about what we believe is constitutional. Because when we try to do something, we try to get an attorney general's opinion, we try to get outside counsel. I can't possibly, with my background, because I'm just a little worker that doesn't have a law degree, but we try to get as many sources to tell us whether we're following the Constitution or not, and then that's what guides us for our decisions when we make votes on pieces of legislation.
This next question is first for Senator Stennett. Since we just talked about the importance of following the rule of law, do you think that the rioting by Antifa, Black Lives Matter, is helping or hurting the cause of law and order in our country?
I'd first say that all lives matter. And according to our Declaration of Independence, we are all created equal and should be treated equally under the law. Unfortunately, our adherence to the Declaration of Independence has not been stellar. That said, I believe that we all have the First Amendment right to peaceful protesting and to be able to stand and defend what it is we are in that fashion. But no time are we to damage property or endanger other people, because that is criminal, and I don't care which side is doing it. So when we have that conversation, they have an ability to have their say. They have their First Amendment rights. They do not have a right to hurt people or damage property. And that would be true of any Antifa or leftist militia or right militia or whomever you want to talk about. Those are the thresholds. Follow the First Amendment.
Well, since it's already been brought up, I'll go back to 2014. In the desert, there was a redress of grievances that occurred. There was no rocks thrown, there was no cars tipped over, there was no fires started, there was no buildings burned to the ground, there was no shootings. We've seen all of those things in our country in the past 6 months. No, I don't think they're helping. I'm an absolutist when it comes to the First Amendment. We just discussed how I put my life on the line to defend it. But I think there's a big push to muddy the water out there. Peaceful protesting. I'm glad to be from Idaho, where we haven't seen any of that. I think we're better than that. And I don't think it's helping at all what we're seeing around the country, and I think it's going to escalate, and it's unfortunate. I hope that we in Idaho can stay calm, cool, clear-minded, tackle some of those issues, and remember we're all Idahoans.
Mr. Parker, Governor Little's emergency gave local control to cities and counties. This debate has been going on for years in Idaho as to who gets to set the rules. What is your view on local versus state control?
Trying to understand the question. Generally speaking, local state control. I think the question was about the governor's executive order, I guess. I believe that our constitutional republic has guidelines set out clear separations of power and control. And anytime we move away from that, we're doing a disservice to the people who formed this country and died for this imbalances and separations of power. So anytime anything happens where we have an emergency order or an executive order, or I think that takes us away from our clear-cut definition of responsibilities. Right now, I believe that the legislature doesn't really have a say much. The Senate doesn't really have a say much, and those are the people that you elected. So we can argue about masks and we can argue about different types of mandates, but my concern with all of this and what's going on is those clear separations of power and the way our government is supposed to run. We're not in that right now, and when I get there in January, we'll try to put some safeguards in place to make sure that those separations of power stay in place.
The governor's proclamation, his decree was to make recommendations during the crisis. The recommendations were, though, placed for implementation on the individual counties and cities and public health boards. So that was put in place so that locals had control over it. So every county and every city and every public health board made its own determinations based on outbreak, healthcare ability, a lot of different things they have to consider. What the state government really gets annoyed about is when the federal government intrudes on their business. And they're pretty vocal about it. But they're equally punitive to local governments. And so when I ask them, how can you say it's okay? How can you say that you really don't like when it's done to you, and then you turn around and do it to the next our local governments? Their answer is, oh, they don't have powers, they're really a political subdivision. Okay, technically that's true, but still, you are expecting local governments to do an extraordinary amount, provide a lot for the people who are closest to that form of government, and you don't give them any ability to get revenue brought in, to administer their taxing districts, their waste management, their wages. Every time a local government decides to do that locally, the state does a law over the top of them because they don't want them to have that power. And so we talk about local control, but I would argue the state really does wield a lot of power over local governments and does not allow the local control we would all like to see in our counties and cities. And so it is up to us to keep defending them. As an example, we were able to bring in money from internet sales. And by law, we were supposed to give, out of the sales tax that we get every year, 11.5% to all our local governments so they can manage their services for us. Instead, the legislature put it into a tax relief fund and did not even pull out that 11.5%, and there's $500 million in it. So that legally 11.5% should have gone to the counties and didn't. So these are things where the state needs to give more power to the local control that we always talk about.
This is first to Senator Stennett. Do you support increasing taxes? And if so, on who?
Well, that's pretty broad, so I'm going to try to navigate through that. It has a place for, it's constitutionally obligated to take care of a education system, which is not inexpensive. In fact, it is probably 63% of our budget. It's extraordinarily large part of our budget, but obligated to do it right, constitutionally. The other part of that is how we manage, and I would argue, some would disagree, that we have a place for public health and safety. that is something that we have an obligation to, because it means managing grids. And that's something that is too hard to do on your individual silos. It needs to be managed as a statewide effort. I would argue as a national-wide effort on a lot of grids. But so if you don't find revenue or resources in order to keep a basic functioning government, steer and ceases to, that is to nobody's benefit. And so yes, there is a purpose for bringing in revenue, and there are many ways you can do that that are equitably. We have a big talk about sales tax, but sales tax as well as us, and they're using our services. So yes, they pay for it. If we are talking about managing, right now, our property tax is the predominant thing that takes care of our schools. Is that fair? I would advocate no. It used to not be that way. It was far more equitable before we did that. For bonds and levies in order to survive. It was never like that before. So when you talk about taxes and increasing taxes, you have to say where they come in for what purpose, for the best benefit and the best bang for your buck. And that is not to say never. That is to say, how do we smartly, wisely use what we have our ability to acquire to the best, highest purpose? Unfortunately, I have argued with the governor and with my colleagues on this infrastructure consideration, that they don't want to put money into it, and inadequately. We have the least amount of money per capita in our per student in our school systems. Can you get a good result if you're not willing to put anything into it? And so these are the conundrums, the debates, the struggle that state government.
But having said that, across the board for everybody. But having said that, I'd really like to focus on what I've said a couple times already, is that I believe the focus should be on industry and bringing more new tax revenue to the state. I think if we're going to keep looking at the backs of the working class, it's going to be like trying to suck blood from a turnip. And if we can't come up with new innovative ways to bring tax revenue to the state, we're probably going to be in trouble. So that's where I think the focus should be. Like I've said, there's industries popping up all over the country, very in-depth, widespread industries. And the idea that we can't get a hemp bill passed in an ag state drives me crazy. We have up here in Custer County one of the only homes that's built by hempcrete. That is a concrete substance made out of the stalks of a plant. They're making hardwood floors out of hemp. They're paper, all these things. If we were to get into that business and start, we get more farmers growing, we get more industries building, and we give entrepreneurs a chance to jump into a new thriving industry. We give the farmers a chance to give kids a new thriving industry to get involved with on the farm. I just really think that we need to get out of the old line of thinking and bring some new thoughts and outside the box problem solving to the Capitol.
This is the last question, and after the last question, I'm going to direct the question to Mr. Parker, and then Senator Stennett will answer it, and then we'll go into closing statements. Oh, okay. So the last question is, 61% of Idaho voters passed an initiative to provide Medicaid expansion for those who need health care in Idaho. Will you, Mr. Parker, vote to fund this program if you are elected?
With any bill, I need to see the language. That's the bottom line. Depends on what's in the bill. I mean, you can tell me some sort of vague setup of a bill that's coming that needs to be developed, but I would have to read it. I would have to look at the language, and I would have to see what the answers were before I said, yes, I'll vote for that. I would also probably look back to my district and start asking you guys what you think, if that's a proper form or way to fund that. I'll go ahead and back up and say that initiative process needs to come with funding. If we're going to put an initiative on the plate for the people of Idaho, it needs to come with how it's going to be funded. It shouldn't be left on the legislature or the senators to figure out after the fact, after the people stand up and say, well, we want this, we don't care how you get it, here it is, figure it out. No, I believe that initiative process has to come with some sort of mechanism as to how the proposed bill will be funded.
The initiative did get passed. It is law. The only thing that was obligated to the legislature was to actually fund it. So the language was there, and it was passed nearly unanimously. Well, unanimously in the Senate, not so much in the House. But the only obligation at that point, because when you do pass an initiative, and it is the responsibility of the legislature to budget it. And so there was a lot of debate about whether they should or not, and be an obstruction to the will of the people by saying, yes, okay, so this is law, but we're not going to put any money into it. And our district the majority did want that. And so when people, we should be representing what the will of our districts and the state have told us. And because you philosophically disagree with it, should be put aside. The people have spoken. And so there was a lot of lack of will to put any funding towards it, or then to restrict it only for 6 months at a time, or just for this year. And so where we're sitting now is we did find the money and the ability to fund it for a year. But it's still law, and we're going to still have this debate if that year comes up and we have to fund it for the next year. And so whether you disagree or agree with how we manage our healthcare, and I would argue we'd all pretty much agree that it is in sore need of fixing, and we've seen that with all of the infrastructure crumbling and the difficulty it has, where we have the least amount of doctors per capita in the state. We have the least amount of healthcare providers per capita in the state. We have large medical deserts. And we do a very poor job on mental health services. And these were things that Medicaid expansion was going to help. And I would argue that that is a far-reaching, far more beneficial program than what we were sitting on before. And so if you choose not to do it, you're not listening to the majority of Idahoans. And it is our job to fund it.
Thank you so much for debate participants for answering the questions. Thank you for the audience again for being very respectful. We are going to do closing with our timekeeping. It's 4 minutes for 1 extra minute. And since the Parker side started with the key flip, we will continue in that order. So go first, and then Senator Stennett. And then you guys are welcome to clap after each of them is done at this point. So.
In closing, I believe that I have the ability to network in the Capitol and get those things done, the things that you need done, that you want done. I believe as a member of the majority party, if you were to send me there, I can network with those individuals I already have a relationship with to get the things done that we need done, like infrastructure, like taking those taxes from the top half. I believe when those things come from a Democrat in the Capitol, they automatically get shoved into the broom closet. But if I were to go there, as a member of the majority party, I believe that I can force that conversation and I can push for the things that you guys want. So really, I'm not going to take the 4 minutes. I'm going to tell you, I want you to hire me. I want to make your concerns my priorities, and I want to bring some new thinking to that Capitol. I also want to defend our rights, our constitutional rights. And I believe the best way to do that is in that building. I've been labeled a bunch of different things. I don't subscribe to a lot of them. If you have any questions about those things, come talk to me. email me, I'll meet with you, we'll do a phone conversation. But I do believe, what I do believe in is defending the Constitution, and I do believe that it's done inside that building where it's chipped away at. And I'm asking you to hire me and send me that. It's Constitution Day. Today's Constitution Day. I brought some pocket constitutions, and I challenge all of you, whether you're on the right or the left, to maybe start thinking and bring those fundamental principles back into your life a little bit, and teach your kids today, because it's the day. My name's Eric Parker. I'm running for Senate District 26, and get a hold of me. Thank you.
Our founding fathers came from very different economics, geography, beliefs, and political preferences. At times quarrelsome and divisive, in a swelteringly hot room, they had the courage to negotiate their agreements and differences, produce some of the most important documents known to mankind. Our Constitution is a dynamic, living document, with 18 amendments added to the original 10. I am grateful to all who fought for everyone's ability to have the right to vote. This year, we celebrate our 100th year with the passage of the 19th Amendment for women's right to vote. Without it, over half of the population would not participate in self-determination through voting. As a member of the Senate leadership, I am proud of our work and all of my Senate colleagues, both sides. We communicate well, we are respectful and civil. 80% of the bills that we pass during the legislative session is done smoothly between both House and Senate and both parties, and that takes work. 20% is more difficult, and it probably should be. Our legislative districts are diverse, like our founders. Different economics, geography, beliefs, and political preferences. I firmly believe that once elected, we represent and assist all our constituents, not just a party. That is why I'm here to listen and speak to you today. No two people live exactly alike, and therefore, crafting solid policies is not a perfect science. But I do have standards. Is it constitutional? Is it enforceable? Will it improve the lives of Idahoans? Is public health and safety threatened? Poorly written or unconstitutional legislation is not an improvement and wastes our tax dollars in court. Public service is to the core of me. Beyond our time in the legislative session setting budgets and voting on legislation, constituent services all year are more important than policy making. People seek advice, assistance, and direction from everything from healthcare to water management, from prisons to wages, from land management to letters of recommendation. Everything that impacts people's lives comes before the legislature. Chairing some, dealing with water, fisheries, fish and game, resource industries, energy, invasive species, voter laws, commerce, broadband, Idaho's place regionally, and its relationship with Western Canada. Sadly, I've presided over many memorials honoring fallen soldiers and former legislators. Their service is properly praised and commemorated, but their strength of character and their integrity and is what is always remembered. What is fundamental to all of us is family, faith, community, and an ability to provide for our well-being. We are all created equal, as defined by our natural rights. No one has a right superior to anyone else. Our right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness imply the right to live as we wish, only if we respect the equal rights of others to do the same. All we have is control over ourselves, how we choose to make this journey. I choose to navigate and find the opportunity in the chaos, the opportunity in the chaos around us, a huge opportunity. But I also choose to navigate my life from here. Not just from here. Make connections, listen, share wisdom and guidance if asked, allow creativity, be kind, and love. I ask for your vote, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you so much again. Thank you, Senator Stennett. Thank you, Eric. I think this was a great discussion. A lot of information was shared. Again, thank you for our wonderful moderators. Thank you for all of the audience and our volunteers from Central Idaho for Liberty. If you guys would give them a round of applause as well. Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you for members of the press for your coverage as well. In conclusion, I would just invite everybody to check out our organization, Central Idaho for Liberty. We're going to be putting out more content out there, doing videos. My wonderful co-host, Jeff Kreisig, is there. We're trying to do some videos, educational videos talking about different issues in our legislative district. And of course, last but not least, please get out and vote this year. It's so important. Thank you.
All right, guys, real quick, I'm going to try and run outside and wrap up in just a second. That way we can kind of close this out. I hope you guys were able to hear. I wasn't able to turn it around, but anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to that debate. It was more of a forum. Debates are kind of more of a back and forth, and that was more of just kind of a Q&A for each of the candidates. But let us know in the comments what you guys thought. I'm going to try and get some interviews, recorded interviews, not live interviews, from both of the people who participated. But thank you guys for watching. I hope you were able to hear. If not, we'll be sure to get some video uploaded where maybe you can hear it a little bit better. So thanks. That's all I've got for now, guys. This is Greg Pruitt with Idaho Dispatch. Be sure to go to idahodispatch.com/donate and pitch in, help us out a little bit. And then also you can also go to idahodispatch.com/sign up and get signed up for our weekly newsletter, which just sends out the articles once a week on Mondays, and that way you guys have that content coming regardless if you're on social media or not. So that's all I've got for now. Take care.